Phoenix at Knoebels is already legendary, crowned the best wooden coaster in the world by the Golden Ticket Awards year after year after year. But today we're doing a bit of a makeover. What if Phoenix didn't stay wooden? What if its world famous airtime was rebuilt with RMC steel, sharper profiling, and modern G-forces, without losing what makes the original special? This isn't about fixing Phoenix, it's about seeing how far an RMC could go. So let's turn this fan favorite coaster into a hypothetical RMC monster. Hello everyone, welcome back to TH Designs. Today's video we are doing another hypothetical conceptual RMC conversion. That's Rocky Mountain Construction. If you don't know the gist, basically they turn old wooden coasters into these incredible steel and wooden hybrid beasts. We're coming hot off the last conversion that we did, which was Wild One at Six Flags America, actually the oldest coaster in all of Six Flags. That was a very fun video, that was a very challenging video. If you have not seen that, go ahead and watch that. Today we're tackling one of the best coasters in the world, at least per title, and one of the world's most favorite, fan favorite coasters. That's Phoenix at Knoebels. So let's jump over to that file and let's talk about the coaster. So here we are in that actual file. You can see the entire recreation of Phoenix. Like I said, if you don't know too much about this coaster, I do recommend watching that previous video. We do go over all of the history of the coaster and what makes this coaster so special. But the general gist is this coaster is an airtime machine. You can see all of these different bunny hop hills and everything. That's what makes this coaster special. I'm going to pause that because this is very loud. So as for the actual conversion, if we look top down at this layout, we do have a fairly simple out and back layout, which does mirror the typical RMC conversions that you'll see in real life. So I'm feeling pretty good about this going into this video. I think that this thing is going to be awesome. So before we start tearing down track by track and replacing it with the steel counterpart, let's jump over to the internet and let's talk about some of the precedents that we can likely take in consideration when we're doing this conversion. So here we are with our first example that is probably very relevant to the type of coaster that we are working with Phoenix, and that is Twisted Cyclone at Six Flags over Georgia. This coaster we have used in I think every single video. It is one of the smallest RMC conversions, if not the smallest, and if we go back in time, we can take a look at the original Georgia Cyclone. And you can see in this older satellite footage, this layout doesn't quite have the figure eight that you see with Phoenix, but it does have this kind of out and back with two big turnarounds. So this is a coaster we may be referring back and forth. And then one other one is Cyclone. I know, not Twisted Cyclone, just Cyclone. This is at Six Flags New England. This is a little bit different, but you can start to see that little bit of a figure eight pattern with these huge turnarounds, and you can see a lot of lapping with track directly next to each other and multiple times going through those turnarounds. We have a lot of overbanked and outer bank turns, and if we look at the original, you can see that figure eight pattern. So I think Cyclone is a pretty good example of what we might be looking at in terms of real life counterpart, real life examples. So with that said, this should be a relatively simple conversion. We do have to start with this kind of interesting indoor segment of track here. So I'm going to start tearing away some track and replacing it with the RMC equivalent, and let's get started. So there we go. There is our RMC placed. I'm going to give it the basic trains, and of course we'll theme this later. Don't mind all the coloring. So like I said, the first thing that we have to deal with is this tunnel, which I think is pretty standard stuff. Typically we have a little bit more freedom to do a pre-lift section. There's not much room to work with, and I do want to keep this structure because it is pretty legendary and iconic. We might be able to fit some little airtime hills, but probably not very much. So I'm going to just build it just before this lift, cut over to that, and we can talk about how tall we want to make this and start doing all the fun stuff, which is all the elements. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I added the track. It goes through the tunnel, pretty simple stuff. Couldn't really do much, so I just kind of did like this twisty thing. I don't really know where it kind of sways side to side. I had some airtime hills in here. They were kind of clunky, so then it turns over, does this little mini airtime hill. I added that airtime hill so it starts a little bit later, but the steepness makes up, so it ends around the same height. It's about 20 feet taller, more or less. I may make it go even higher, but I think it'll be pretty sufficient. You think about Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England, and it is a height of 109 feet. If we look at Twisted Cyclone, don't get them mixed up, that's 100 feet. So I may raise it up more. This is actually a very short RMC. Of course, we will keep this little queen structure, the crown. This is pretty iconic for the original Phoenix, so I'm just gonna, for now, place it there, I suppose. Actually, I'm going to raise it up more now because you got to think about also, while the chain lift is steeper, the drop is going to be much steeper. So with our drop done, it's about an 80-degree drop, so nothing too unusual for an RMC. We are approaching this first turnaround, and we have to think about what we want to do here. So there's a few different options that we can do. What's not too unusual for an RMC is to do a lot of outer bank turns, over bank turns, such and such, a lot of airtime. But what I have in mind for really this turnaround and this turnaround alone, because this is probably the only chance to do it, is a reverse cobra roll, which we have done on the Thunderhawk RMC, and we're going to do something similar. The reason I do it instead of some of the more airtime hills is because I think every other feature of this track layout is going to be super airtime heavy, and I think an RMC wants to invert naturally, and I think that this is probably a pretty good time to do such. So if you're not familiar with what a reverse cobra roll is, it is on Twisted Cyclone, as you can see here. I'll attach a POV, but really it's pretty much a 0G roll that turns into this big sweeping turn into a second 0G roll, completing this kind of cobra roll mechanism. So I'm just going to get building. I'm going to remove all of this, including this support structure. I don't think we'll keep that. Actually, maybe just in case I'll place it over there. So I'm going to get building, and we'll be back. Alright, there's our reverse cobra roll done. Pretty good height. I think we're at like 65 feet or so. I have to pause the game. This ride is just screaming in my ear. Got a little bit of an airtime hill here, only a few feet or so, but this drop does look pretty good and takes that airtime hill relatively nicely. It's very gentle, or very gradual at least. Yeah, you can see it takes the reverse cobra roll pretty well. Of course, now we have all of these bunny hop hills before we eventually go into the second turnaround, which is probably going to be outer bank turns or over bank turns. I haven't decided just yet. So I'm going to quickly make these little bunny hop hills. They should be very easy to make. I don't even think I'm going to add any banking to throw people out of their seat. Not yet. I think I'm strictly just going to keep it straight, and we're going to end just before this turnaround here. So pretty standard stuff. I may show the time lapse or may not, depending how long it takes. Alright, so there's the little airtime hills done. You can see this big one here is a lot like what you might see on Twisted Timbers, which I think I mentioned earlier in the video. As for this second one, I wanted to get smaller ones in, but because we have this road rally kind of car thing going through, we couldn't lower this second airtime hill, so it turned into like this double up into this kind of mirror image of the other airtime hill, which in the POV I really like. It takes it at a good speed. So that brings us to our second turnaround. So going into that turnaround, we could do something like we see on Wicked Cyclone with that overbank turn that we just saw there, and we see it again coming at a little 0G roll, another overbank turn, and into a little pop of airtime into a double down, which we are about to enter into our double up. So this isn't the worst thing. I think what's best is to actually do some overbank turns, some high speed overbank turns over this track, which will be something like the brake run. I really don't know what I'm going to do for the brake run because this is all one round brake run, which is unusual. For now, I'm going to build some overbank turns similar to what we did actually on the last coaster, Wild One, and we will be turning around into the double up, which is going to be very easy and straightforward. Alright, here's our turnaround done. You can see some kind of overbank turns, more or less, into a little mini airtime hill before it dives all the way down. We're entering that little double up area. See, in the original, the double up started just next to that chain lift. We are starting over here because I imagine it's going to be a little bit steeper and more aggressive than this very drawn out double up and double down that you see on the original. So let's delete this and let's attack this famous double up and double down. Again, probably going to keep it more or less as you see it, just going to make it more like an RMC, a little bit more aggressive. Alright, there's our double up and double down done. You can see it's modified just a bit, a little bit steeper transitions between the elements because it is an RMC. All in all, the airtime hills are typical. There's no banking or anything except for the peak airtime hill. We do have a outer bank to kind of throw riders to the side, to keep it somewhat interesting. I was tempted to do a 0G stall, something like what you might see on like Goliath, where their RMC has like that classic support structure with that secondary beam next to it, where a 0G stall would go. Because like I said from the beginning, this coaster, this original Phoenix, is all about airtime. I'm super prioritizing airtime on this coaster. We are entering that second turnaround, which is where we're going to see some even more overbank and outer bank turns, just like what we saw in the POVs that we looked over a few minutes ago. So I'm going to remove all of this. We're going to end here just before the final little airtime hills entering the brake run. This part will be very easy. This little turnaround here, I'm just going to do some overbanked outer bank. We'll see. We'll figure it out. Alright, there's our turnaround done. You can see we have a little bit more airtime hills added between the turnaround. Sweeps up into an outer bank turn, which looking in the POV looks fantastic. Goes right over the roadway. It exits with this curve, which transitions into a 0G roll. I thought it was a nice excuse to put a 0G roll there. POV again looks really solid on that maneuver. We could have done another airtime hill. We'll see what the final numbers are. We could always adjust it, but we are entering this final strip of genuinely like 4 bunny hop hills, so I don't think we'll need it. The pacing is good. We're about to get a lot of ejector airtime on this little straight, and of course the brake run is here at the end. So I'm going to build that, and we can figure out how to maybe attack this brake run. I'm not entirely sure what I want to do. Part of me wants to keep it. Part of me doesn't know how exactly we're going to keep it. We'll see. I'm probably going to end about here. So there is our final strip of airtime hills done. We have 2 outer bank airtime hills, outer banking airtime hills that throw you to the side. Then we have a middle one that throws you up in the air pretty straight. That second one I mentioned here, and then a little one into the brake run, which the train should be going through about right now. Yep. So you can see it's at a pretty good speed through these elements as it's warping through the supports. Yeah, good stuff. I think at a very reasonable speed for a coaster of this size. This coaster looks pretty good so far. Now we have to tackle this brake run that we've been talking about. And I think after thinking about it for a second, I'm going to remove all of these real quick. I'm going to add the curving piece of track here, something more or less like that. We're kind of honoring that curved bit of track. Of course, I'm going to make this look nice. This will be the actual brake run here. I suppose I'll make something here with some kind of transfer track. I'm not entirely sure. Better than these boxes. So as for the coaster, I'm going to just have it like sweep up to the left and do some kind of funky turnaround or something into the brake run. Which this should be enough runoff, more or less, to slow the train down. If not, these are all friction brakes here. So I'm going to build that real quick, and then that'll be the end of this coaster. Alright, so there's the layout completely done. This kind of awkward turnaround is kind of what we had to deal with, but we did add a 0G roll instead of that airtime hill. It's at a slow enough speed where this tight of a 0G roll is pretty good, I think at least. Overall, I think we're all set. I did a little bit more smoothing. Really, I think all that's left to do is to just do all the supports, do all the coloring, come up with some kind of name. Of course, the original name was Phoenix, so we have a lot to play around with there. So yeah, I think this layout is pretty solid. It's an airtime machine. Before we actually jump into all the stats and of course the POV and the cinematic, I'm going to do all the decorating and make it look all pretty. So I will see you in a few seconds. Alright, we are back. All of the touch-ups are complete. The name of the coaster is Rise of the Phoenix. Not the most unique name, but kind of appropriate to the idea of the Phoenix rising from the ashes. Also kind of appropriate with the idea, as you see the train flying through the track is not one color. In fact, it's a couple different shades of colors. Any point where there's a lot of negative G-forces, a lot of airtime, you see the track turns red and then slowly transitions back to that yellow color. It was originally yellow and brown, but it was too close to Thunderhawk, and we had the chance to do something cool with the flames that naturally come with the idea of a phoenix. So this was kind of what I came up with. I think it looks pretty cool. I think it makes it look a little bit different. Overall, the experience, the POV is pretty smooth. It's a pretty solid layout. The trains themselves are not too detailed, pretty much just have like flames attached to them, nothing too crazy. But all in all, I think that this is a pretty solid coaster. I was debating making the coaster supports green, similar to the original Phoenix, which is a very muted dark green, which I do love, and I think it complements the Pennsylvania fall foliage that you see around it. But I really wanted the track to be a warm color, and it just didn't look good with green. So this was what we went with the brown and then the red, orange, and yellow tones. So I would say all in all, this was a very successful conversion. I can't wait to show you guys the POV and the cinematic. I do think you guys will enjoy it. I'm going to let it run so we can actually talk about the stats of this ride. before we head over to the cinematic. You can see the stats right here after that first train went through. 6.23 excitement, that's pretty solid. I actually expected a little bit higher, but that's not bad at all. 3.76 fear is on the lower end, not the worst, but could be better. And nausea is pretty good. So all in all, these stats are not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought they were actually going to be a little bit better. Let's actually look at the statistics. For track length, we're at 3,469. That's pretty good. If you think of like Twisted Cyclone in Georgia, that's like only like 2,400, so we're 1,000 feet more than that. Almost a 90-second ride duration, that's pretty solid. Maximum speed of 54 miles per hour. Again, pretty solid for an RMC of this size. Biggest drop, 93 feet, of course, being right here. Maximum vertical G-force, 4.26, that's in the threshold of realism. Minimum being negative 1.83, that's fairly solid airtime. The airtime count is 12, and the total duration of airtime is 5.3. That's lower than actually what I wanted it to be. The original Phoenix has I think 8 or 9 airtime hills, so we do have more than the original. And if you look at Twisted Cyclone, like we've been referencing for much of this video, that has 10, so we are above the typical range that you'll see for an RMC of this size. You're not going to see insane numbers like you would see on, say, a Steel Vengeance or an Iron Gwazi or anything like that. We just don't have the footprint for it. I'm sure we will do a conversion that will be that size. It may be the next one, actually. It may be the Beast. Wink, wink, hint, hint. I don't know. I'm really tempted to do it. Either way, I would say that this is a pretty successful addition to this little mini-series that we are doing. This has been very fun thus far. And let's jump over to the cinematic and the POV, and you guys will actually see what this ride looks like from a guest point of view. I look forward to it. I think you guys should as well, and I'll see you then.